in Babylon, vastly before Christianity, you had Nimrod, Tammuz, Semiramis. Father, Mother, Son. The Trinity. And Nimrod was symbolized in many different ways. And one of the ways he was symbolized was as the eagle looking both ways. And what you're looking at there is a symbol of modern Freemasonry. The symbols of the modern secret societies that control the world to this minute are the symbols of ancient Babylon and this period where this area of the world where it all came out of. Incidentally, another aspect of Nimrod died with a lamb at his feet, was put into a tomb, and when after 3 days they pulled the stone back, there was no one there. I think I've heard that somewhere before too. This is another sun god who didn't exist, called Mithra. In Persia, Rome, and even Mithra artifacts have been found even in Britain. And what did they say about this guy, Mithra? He was born on December the 25th. He was born to a virgin mother. He died so our sins could be forgiven. They brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh to his birth. And that they called him the vine. They called him the Lord, the shepherd. All the things you see in the New Testament, you see said about Mithra. And where the Roman Catholic Center is now, the Vatican, on that site, they found Mithra artifacts because it was a place of Mithra worship. And Mithra ran right up into the Jesus period, and they basically changed the name of Mithra to Jesus, and we had another religion. What they said about Jesus on the right there and what they said about Horus, the son of God of ancient Egypt, was identical. Because Nimrod, Tammuz, Semiramis in Babylon, when these reptile human bloodlines took over the culture of Egypt, which had been started by the white race, the Phoenicians, they just transferred the same story and called it different names. So Nimrod, Tammuz, Semiramis in Babylon became Osiris, Isis, and Horus in Egypt. And again, right across the world, in different cultures and different eras, you see different names for the same deities. There seems to be a mass of names, very confusing. In fact, they're different names for the same deities. The cross is supposed to be a Christian symbol. It's not. It goes back as far as history goes back. This is a standing stone with a cross. Here we have Mother Mary holding Jesus, except that we don't. This is how the Egyptians symbolized Isis holding Horus. And again, in my book, The Biggest Secret, you'll see massive documentation of how this story just goes on being repeated. The initiates know what it means, the brotherhood, the mass of the people are asked to take it literally. What actually turned Christianity into the religion it became, and who decided what Christians believe to this day, was a Roman emperor called Constantine the Great. In 325 AD, he called a meeting of bishops in the early Christian church to his palace at Nicaea, now Iznik in northwest Turkey, and there the Nicene Creed was created. After they'd had a punch-up and ripped up documents and all that stuff, they decided the Nicene Creed would be as it is to this very day, and that's what Christians are supposed to believe. In this sign you will conquer, what Constantine said, and he was a sun worshipper. He worshipped a deity called Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, and Mithra and all this stuff. He had no problem with Jesus because it was just a different name he believed for what he was already believing anyway. What he said was that before a battle, when he was battling to become emperor, he saw a cross in the sky from Jesus saying, by this sign, or in this sign you will conquer in the battle, which sounds massively like what the Prince of Peace would say, doesn't it, really? So Christianity was a manufactured religion. Here we see the Pope. There's the Maltese cross, a brotherhood symbol that you can see to the present day. I'll come to that shortly. But on the Pope's head is the mitre. And if you look at it sideways on, it's actually a fish head. Why is it a fish head? Because that's the symbol of Nimrod, the Babylonian god figure, who they symbolized as a fish, as they symbolized his partner Semiramis as a dove. And this is where the fish comes from. In Christianity, as well as the House of Pisces. So basically, and the biggest secret documents this in detail, the Babylonian group moved home to Rome, the New Babylon. Now, also in this story, if we move forward to the time of the Crusades in the 1100s, 1200s, you find that in the Middle East at that time, a series of knights organizations suddenly appeared, which are still going today, and among their members today are some of the top people in global politics, business, banking, military, media, etc. They were the Teutonic Knights, which relate to Germany. They were the Knights Hospitaller of St. John of Jerusalem. And St. John, incidentally, is a symbol of Nimrod, for reasons the biggest secret explains. And the other one, which I'm going to concentrate on for a few minutes, was the Knights Templar. And they all appeared around Jerusalem at the time of the Crusades. And the Knights Templar said that they'd created this organization originally to protect pilgrims who were visiting the Holy Land. Well, there's only 9 of these fellas for 9 years, which is going to protect a massive amount of pilgrims, clearly. After they'd parked themselves in Jerusalem, right next to what we now call Temple Mount, the so-called scene of Solomon's temple. But when you look at the background of Solomon, there is no evidence he existed outside the Old Testament, and every syllable of Solomon means the sun, another symbol. Anyway, after 9 years in the Jerusalem area, next to the Temple Mount, suddenly things started to move very rapidly for the Templars. Some of them went back to Europe, and they started signing up the noble families of Europe, and to particularly France to start with. And to join the Templars, you had to give them all your wealth. So they became massively wealthy very, very, very quickly. And they created 2 basic financial centers in their empire. One was in Paris, one was in London. Today, Paris and London are the 2 key centers of the operational level of the manipulation of the world. No coincidence. After a while, however, the King of France, Philip the Fair, who was up to his neck in debt to the Templars, decided that he was going to remove them. Now, this thing about debt's very important. You can follow through these bloodlines out of the Middle East, these reptilian human bloodlines that became the European aristocracy, etc., a number of themes that keep reoccurring. One is creating prison religions based on the basically same story, to keep masses in ignorance. 2 is satanic ritual and blood drinking and such human sacrifice ceremonies, which are still going on today to the same deities they did in the ancient world. And thirdly, the scam where you lend money that doesn't exist to the population and charge them interest on it, which is what happens to this very day, of course. The debt we call debt in the world is actually debt that doesn't exist. It's just figures on a screen. There's no money involved at all. It's just a thought form. So what happened with the Templars is that they played this scam because they were part of this stream, and they got the crown heads of Europe up to their neck in debt to them, just as their successors have the governments of the world today in debt to them. So Philip the Fair wanted to bring an end to this, and there's more to that story as well. And on Friday the 13th, in October 1307, he issued orders, supposedly secret orders, to arrest the Templars on that morning. That's why Friday the 13th has been deemed unlucky ever since. Now, he got some of the Templars, but he didn't get most of them. They got away, and they went in 3 basic directions. One, they crossed the Atlantic to the Americas, and 2 other directions. First of all, they went off from their port at La Rochelle in France with the loot, because when Philip the Fair went to get the loot from the Templars in their headquarters in Paris, it had all gone. And they went in their ships, one group of them, around the outside, the west coast of Ireland and into Scotland. And there's a reason they did that, 2 reasons, in fact. First of all, Philip the Fair enlisted the support of the Pope to purge the Templars. But Scotland, with Robert the Bruce, etc., was in conflict with the Pope at the time, and therefore excommunicated, and therefore the Destroy the Templars order didn't apply in Scotland at that time. And also, a tremendous number of these bloodline families out of the Near East, these reptile human bloodlines, came out of northern France and Belgium, what we call that area now anyway, and went into Scotland almost en masse. Within 150 years, these bloodlines were running Scotland, and they have the names today that we think are Scottish. We go, Hamilton, Orkney, and MacDougall, Orkney. Scottish? No, no. They came out of that area of northern France and Belgium. And they were the same bloodlines. Robert the Bruce was one of them that the Templars were connected to. So the Templars went into friendly territory. And they went underground because of the purge, and they re-emerged eventually as the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. This is why the biggest secret society in the world today that pervades world politics, business, banking, the media, etc., is called the Scottish Rite, after this tiny country at the top of the British Isles, because that's where the Templars went when the purge happened. This is a Knights Templar. You'll see the red cross on the white background. That was the Phoenician fire cross or sun cross. And this is why the flag of England is a red cross on the white background. It's also why you had the Red Cross organization, which is also linked to this network at the highest level. Now, here's the flag of England. It's called the St. George's Cross. Now, two big British deities were St. George, who killed the dragon, and the more I research this, the more I feel that is symbolic of this battle between this Martian white race and this Anunnaki reptilian race, because the dragon was very much used to symbolize this serpent race in the ancient world. And so St. George is not actually a British deity, it's actually Phoenician, because that's where the Phoenicians went, to Britain. St. Michael, which is a great Christian deity, was an ancient Phoenician deity also, and areas of Europe, like called St. Michael's Mount, one in England, southern England, came from the Phoenicians who settled that area. Now, the Templars then moved out of France, around into Scotland, and that was one area they went. They went across to the Americas, and they also went down to Portugal. Now, before I get into that, let me show you one thing in Scotland, which confirms so much of the fact the Templars were there, and indeed there are many artifacts to prove it, and other evidence. And that's this place, Rosslyn Chapel, in just south of Edinburgh it is, the great city on the east coast of Scotland. And this was built on the land of the St. Clair family. Now, the St. Clair family were a French bloodline going back to the Near East that went to Scotland and became the Sinclair family, that classic Scottish name Sinclair. And this is one of the great holy grails of the Brotherhood today, the Rosslyn Chapel. Now, in the stonework of Rosslyn Chapel, you see sweet corn plants, aloe plants, and cactus plants, etc., that at the time this was built were only found in America. Perhaps still are, I don't know, but certainly then. Which is remarkable because this was built before Columbus left on his journey to discover America. In other words, they'd been long before, they just didn't want us to know it. So, as they went to Scotland, so another group of Templars came down to Portugal, which will connect into America now as we start to enter the modern world. They hid behind an organization called the Knights of Christ. The Knights Templar are under another name. And they were a maritime organization because the Templars had a massive fleet of ships. And actually they flew on their ships the flag of the Skull and Bones, which has become known as the Pirates' flag. It was the Templar flag, which is why the Skull and Bones is still a symbol today of this brotherhood. And one of the Grand Masters of this Knights of Christ, the Templars under another name, was a guy called Prince Henry the Navigator. And he had access to maps of the world that the general population never had because of this pyramid, knowledge, ignorance. This is significant because the father-in-law of Christopher Columbus was a sea captain close to Prince Henry the Navigator. So Columbus was not looking for India when he found the Americas. He knew basically where he was going because the maps already existed. Because this unfolding agenda has a time scale, not least through the sun cycles, etc., it means that although they knew the Americas existed, the point had come in the agenda where it had to be officially discovered and therefore occupied by the European races.